If you have a busy brain, you know that cooking can require a lot of executive function. But it's also a great way to build executive function. And those skills, time management, prioritization, task initiation, you can bring them out of the kitchen and into every other aspect of your life. Work, parenting, hobbies. My guest today, Sophie Mortner, is an educator, a learning designer, and an executive function coach who is pouring her knowledge into her Substack newsletter called Nibblings. She shares easy-to-follow recipes in her uniquely accessible format to get kids and adults flexing those executive function muscles and having fun in the kitchen. So if you've ever struggled to read through a recipe, or you have a little one who wants to whip up their own chocolate cake, you are not going to want to miss this one. Let's talk to Sophie.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
Sophie Mortner, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you, Catherine.
Sophie, I'm so happy to have you here. There are so many, if you have a little Venn diagram of our lives and our interests and our professional pieces, I feel like there's a lot of overlap. You have, worked as an educator, as an executive functioning coach. You talk about learning design and, of course, food. And you have this Substack, Nibblings. So for those who are not familiar with your work, could you give us a little brief rundown on kind of your background and what brings you here?
Yeah, so my training is as an educator. I've been working with kids in learning spaces for over a decade. Out of college, I went right into the classroom, and I later got my master's in education and learning and teaching. And I've worked as an educator in many different ways. So like I said, in the classroom, in formal spaces, in summer camps, some more informal spaces. And then when I finally left the classroom, I started designing learning for kids in like ed tech. So think like curriculum being used in classrooms around the country, around the world. And then I, throughout all of that, have always been really interested in my own personal hobbies and my own personal learning. And that really took me deep into learning about cooking, and especially like learning cooking through informal learning, like through YouTube, through reading cookbooks, not, I didn't go to culinary school. So all of my education around cooking has happened informally, which has been really interesting to me as an educator, because I think a lot about how learning looks in different spaces. And I've just kind of found myself really in love with the idea that cooking and learning to cook is this perfect blend and like perfect example of what learning, like really rich, exciting, deep learning looks like, where you can experience failure, you can experience like so much success, where you can like really watch your growth. And so as an educator, that has always been really exciting to me. And I've kind of just decided, like, how can I use what I know about learning and about kids and apply that to teaching them cooking? So that's kind of like how I found myself where I am now.
What is so interesting to me about Nibblings, and like so many Substacks, it kind of seems like, you went in breaking down cooking for kids, and then you had this response that was like, hey, for those of us with executive dysfunction, those of us with ADHD, this approach is super helpful. One of the things that I love about the way that you write about this is I always say, okay, I'm going to help you be a more successful cook in the kitchen if you have ADHD, and I'm going to help you enjoy the cooking part. But sort of the Trojan horse of all that is when you build that confidence and get those skills in the kitchen, you can take them out into the world. And you've done a really good job about kind of breaking that down and talking about that. And I was reading one of the more recent pieces that you wrote on your Substack, Nibblings, and you were talking about how cooking helps with time management, and how it helps with time blindness, and how it helps with task initiation. Could we kind of one at a time go through some of those ways in which you think cooking can help with these different skills?
I think task initiation is like the first, it's like, where do you get started? For a lot of people with ADHD specifically, like getting started is the most challenging task. It's one for a lot of, like, with an ADHD brain, like one of the amazing strengths is like once you're in it, like you're in it and you're going, and that's that's like incredible. Like you can go for forever. I watch my husband just like grind it out, and I'm like, how does he not need a break? But it's the getting started that is really, really tricky. And I talk to my students about, if you're having trouble getting started, sometimes the first task is too big. And I think in cooking, the first task is really clear. Like it's just getting out your materials. And so I really break that down in my recipes. Like just get out what you need. Like that's it. And I mean, I find that like once I have everything out, like it really starts moving and progressing quite easily. So that's like one example of a executive functioning strategy or skill that is very much applicable to cooking. I think time awareness and time blindness is also a really big piece of it. Like, and specifically people with ADHD, time awareness is a real challenge. And for folks who don't, maybe know what that term means, it's the idea of understanding really like how long something will take. So sometimes I'll ask people that I'm working with as an executive functioning coach, like, how long does it take you to take a shower? And they'll just kind of be like, I don't know. And I'm like, give me an estimate. And it takes them like a while to kind of come up with the idea, like maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 15. But when we have good time awareness, we can plan, we can strategize around how we're spending our time. We can maybe be less avoidant about an activity because we know it's going to take less time. And the kitchen is like something where time is really relevant because you're setting timers. So even just like, setting a timer, in my recipes, I have kids even set timers for like the amount of time that they're mixing something, or, obviously setting timers for when something is going in the oven. But in order to develop the skill of time awareness, which is a skill that really, like I should say, it can be developed if you're like, oh my God, I have such time blindness, like you can grow it.
I mean, what's so interesting, there have been so many conversations I've had in this podcast that have made me realize things like at the age of 40 that are so helpful that I like didn't even realize I needed to know. Regarding time blindness, like just quick little story. Before this interview, it's really hot today in Boston. Like we're heading into a heat wave. And I was like, I need to soak my plants before the heat of the day comes on so they're okay. And I'm out there and I have like 15 minutes. And I'm like, I can water everything. Maybe I should actually transplant these plants. Like I have these plants I dug up from my mom's garden yesterday. Like I could probably just get them in there. And I was this close, Sophie, to coming here covered in dirt, covered in sweat, because I was like, I'm sure I could do that. Like it's this ridiculous confidence where it shouldn't be. And then something as simple as like send an email, which would actually maybe take like 2 minutes. The avoidance is so intense. And it's like, well, I couldn't possibly have time for that. So I know that you originally developed this for kids, but it is so true that like practicing that time awareness is something I had not thought about with cooking. And I'm just so much more aware now of like, oh, I do have the capability to understand it. Now, how can I apply this to other parts of my life outside of the kitchen?
Totally. And I mean, since you spend time in the kitchen, you probably have a good sense of like, however many times you've made cookies, like you probably have a good sense of how long it's going to take you to do it. Also, when you set a timer for 20 minutes, you then get to have that experience of like, oh, this is what 20 minutes feels like. And part of like growing time awareness is like just noticing the time. Like where I tell my clients, like wear a watch. Like the more you notice the time, the more time awareness you'll gain. And so the kitchen feels like a great space to do that because obviously there's clocks in the kitchen and you're setting timers. And once you develop that skill, you really can apply it elsewhere.
I want to go back to the task avoidance. You had said kind of gathering your things. Could we dig a little bit deeper in that? Because I know tax avoidance is also a thing for any freelancer, but
yes,
task avoidance is a huge problem for so many ADHDers. Can you dig in a little bit more about how you think about that, work on that?
Based on my experience working closely with kids and adults with ADHD, is task avoidance is huge. And I definitely think so there's like the two pieces starting with is, I already mentioned like the getting started piece, right? Like you mentioned that email, like you're avoiding, like you don't want to write the email. Maybe getting started is like not internalizing this idea, like I need to like write a perfect email. Like getting started is actually opening up your Gmail, opening up a blank email. And often if we kind of like get that piece and we break it down that like that small, it kind of like will help build momentum to the next step. Yeah. So I kind of like always keep that mantra of like, if you're having trouble getting started, the first task is too big. And sometimes I'll ask people like, I always use my husband as an example. I like really helped him through law school. And it was like, I have to write this paper. And I'm like, great. What do you need to do first? Well, I have to write it. And it's like, no, like first you need to open up your computer. Then you need to like read the assignment again. So it's just really like breaking it down so much smaller so that when you think about what it is that you need to do, the first pieces feel more manageable and you can kind of like trust yourself through it. The other part with task avoidance that is the time awareness piece. Like, as you're breaking it down, kind of making estimates about how long different parts will take. I imagine like if you thought about that email and you kind of said to yourself, okay, how long is it going to take? Okay, it's going to take 2 minutes. That might have made it feel a little bit less scary because like you're like, I can do something for 2 minutes. Like that's not that hard. So that is like obviously very helpful with task avoidance. And then like the other piece, which works really well for some people, is like just giving yourself contingent reinforcement. Like, I'm going to do this. And when I'm done, I'm going to get a reward. And maybe that's scrolling on my phone for 15 minutes. Maybe that's eating a really good snack.
So I just am like giving myself a little treat, but the appropriate fancy way to say it is contingent reinforcement.
Yeah,
okay,
like so exactly. Like once I get this done, I'll go take a walk outside. And it's whatever you would be doing if you didn't have to work during the day. Like those are the things. Just find your reward and, set that up as like, that's what I'm doing next and choose it. Like, for the email, like, don't just be like, I'll get a reward at the end. Like choose your reward, like, so what's coming. There's like, so those are just different strategies of like how to get through the thing that we're avoiding. And I mean, I just try to be like really, for myself, like really self-aware and like have so much, like it's such a like metacognitive process of like, I'm constantly talking myself through it. Like, why am I not doing it? What can I try to do? What will help me through it? Like, what do I need? And I find that when I build that like self-awareness and conversation with myself, I kind of can like start implementing strategies to get through things that I don't want to do.
Is that something you're born with? Is that something that you learned at school? Like I am the opposite. Like I am just now. I think because I was, and perhaps it was because I was diagnosed early. I don't know, but I've had more of a, I don't want to think about that. Like I know that's something that I'm not good at. And so I just don't want to go there. And it's only recently that I've become a bit more curious. And I'm already seeing the benefits of how helpful it is to be curious about my cognitive awareness. But can you talk a little bit about like how one gets to that place and how we can shift our mindset?
I mean, I think it's really important to know that like you can totally develop these skills. Like obviously someone with ADHD, like these things are really challenging. Like it's really hard. And like we can acknowledge that, but there are like we can develop strategies and put systems in place to support them. And we don't have to just expect like if you have ADHD, like it's just gonna like everything is just gonna feel hard all the time, right? Like I think it would be really great in school if we were really intentional with kids about like, there's so much learning that has to happen. Obviously, there's like all of these standards that need to be met. But to me, like the most important part about school is like learning how to learn. And I feel like that's not done so explicitly because we're so focused on all of these other standards that need to be met and tests that need to be taken. But so that's why I guess with Nibblings, like it's really about like pulling back the curtain for parents and kids to say like, this is like stuff your kids' teachers are doing in the classroom all the time. They just aren't like telling you about it. Like they're being very intentional about how they're introducing a new math strategy and the ways the kids are practicing it. So I just find that like if we pull back the curtain and like really share this knowledge, right, that like educators have or that feels really intuitive to educators, then it like we can generalize it and apply it to all aspects of our lives. And that would just make being a person, being a lifelong learner so much easier and so much more enjoyable.
Yeah. So how did you end up focusing on Nibblings? Like how did the kitchen and food become the medium to share this information?
I mean, it's a great question because I was so squarely like in this education world in classrooms, but always like I really have always felt like this dissonance. Like I'm in classrooms, but I just don't love the way learning looks in classrooms and the way it feels. It never felt great to me. And I guess I kind of like in my adulthood, like really kind of was able to start finding hobbies out of interest and love, which it wasn't as much available as a kid. I think I felt very pressured, like, what is this going to look like for like a college application? And when I started finding interests and like actually developing learning based on personal interests, which was one of those things was cooking, I like saw what learning could feel like in really, really wonderful ways. And I wrote about this most recently. Like I was kind of my husband and I decided, this was before we had kids, but we decided we were going to start like doing like cooking our way through a cookbook together on Sunday nights. And as we were doing that, and like after I'd kind of already been doing my own learning about cooking, so it was all like self-initiated. I was watching YouTube videos and reading cookbooks and cooking with friends. I started cooking in the kitchen more with my husband. And as I was watching him cook, and as I mentioned, he has ADHD, I started to just realize like what was really challenging for him about it. And I guess like the connection just like really clicked for me. It was like, there's so many skills that we can develop here in the kitchen that are obviously so like important and essential to life. Like it's essential to be able to cook food for yourself. And also things that you can transfer elsewhere. Like I was saying, you know, that you can generalize into other hobbies, into your career, into just managing your life that I see in the kitchen. So I started to think a little bit about like what's available for kids as, you know, budding chefs. And as I looked around, I noticed that there's a lot of people making recipes for kids. And there's like a lot of really great content. But I didn't find that there were people coming at it like from my perspective with this really deep knowledge about how learning happens, about learning design. I've like written so many lessons and so much material for kids. And I just was like, I think that there's like kind of a missing piece here.
Could you break down for someone like what makes a nibbling recipe a nibbling recipe? Like for folks who have yet to see your recipes, like how does it differ? What are they getting?
So it's a few things. I mean, for starters, I really wanted to avoid the idea of like, it's a kid, so it needs to just be like a quesadilla. Like, let's just do easy, because that's not going to be that exciting. Like they are going to want, you know, it sounds so much better to make like a decadent chocolate cake, and let's instead kind of trust their capabilities and give them that challenge, because that's going to be more, there's like more pride that will come with that. And there is just like, you know, more motivation. So that's kind of like the first piece when I think about what recipe to make. As I kind of make recipes on my own, reading cookbooks, or as I'm developing a recipe, I really think about the barriers that are going to come up as we're cooking. And this is true, you know, when you're designing a lesson in school too. And barriers are like things like accessibility. Like with kids, it's like I want to avoid knife use or anything that feels like an adult has to be present. I'm going to try to avoid that. Another barrier is just like literacy, like the language that kids are using. I was finding, or that kids are able to read and decode. You know, sometimes when I've looked at other kids' cookbooks, I'm noticing that there is like vocabulary that they're actually, you know, that they might not have, and they don't know. And like if you're missing a vocabulary word while you're making a recipe, like that's a huge disadvantage. So I think about that. And then I guess like I think about myself as I read a recipe. Something I talk about a lot is like, I guess we all know when you read a recipe, you're supposed to like read through it, right? Like you're supposed to read the whole recipe and then you start cooking.
You're supposed to.
You're supposed to. Right. I always do, because I'm very rule bound, and I also just like see the advantage of doing it. But if we are just kind of like expecting, like it just is it's already an unfair expectation for adults, right? But it's really an unfair expectation for kids, because the barriers of reading is like already there. Like, you know, I'm designing these recipes for independent readers, but sometimes new readers. Like 9-year-olds. So getting through that much text is actually a very big lift. So rather than expect them to read through an entire recipe, also because like they're not going to do it, is I'll do like a recipe preview page where I have the recipe displayed with way less text so they can kind of like see a map of where it's going and then they can visualize what's coming. So that's like one way that I like am addressing a barrier, but giving them like scaffolding them so they're able to still use that skill of like it's useful when you're cooking to have a visual map of what's coming next. You know, other barriers might be I add a lot of images into my recipes because that's just like another way to, you know, if someone does have some struggles with reading or maybe is a little bit stuck and not making sense of what's happening, like there's another tool to refer to make sense of what they should be doing. I also, you know, rather than having all the text on one page or across 2 pages and it's like a chunk of text, like what I know about a lot of kids and maybe adults too is like when we see a lot of text, it can feel really daunting and that might trigger some avoidance. So I really break it down in educational jargon is what's called chunking, so that they're really doing like different chunks of the recipe at a time. And so they're only on like one page doing, you know, just mixing the dry ingredients. Don't worry about what's coming next yet because that's going to feel a little bit overwhelming. And then when you're done, there's a reminder to go to the next page. So there's just like these pieces that I've implemented throughout that have become very intuitive to me as an educator, but are so intentional so that as someone, kids or adults, are cooking through a Nibblings recipe, there's just like all of this support to guide success so that there's like that amazing joy at the end of like what you produced and what you're able to do.
You know, I have 2 children, and my youngest has suddenly expressed a real desire to be in the kitchen. And I am excited about that and also really overwhelmed. I've had a bit of guilt that I don't cook more with my oldest, and this is making me want to. But my youngest was so like, I want to do this. And, you know, we've been making scrambled eggs, and he's doing some cooking with my mom actually right now. But I am so overwhelmed by how am I going to stay patient and calm in the face of these multi-step recipes. And so I'm really excited to cook some of your recipes with Pete because I need that scaffolding and that support of like, don't worry about the next part. Like, we're just going to stay here because I think as someone with a busy brain, I'm constantly jumping ahead, thinking ahead, but I don't want to be trying to translate that to my child, right? Who's going one step at a time. So that's great. But this has all got me thinking about what would you maybe say to other parents who might be feeling really like overwhelmed and intimidated about bringing their kids into the kitchen?
Yeah, and I hear that a lot, and I totally get it. It's scary because also the kitchen is not the safest place, but also I think that's like part of what makes it so exciting to kids. And we obviously, as parents, as educators, like we really want to capitalize on that interest and that excitement about doing something independently. In all of my recipes, I write like what I personally call my like parent companion piece. And in that, I talk about some ways to set up for success to just so that like parents will hopefully read it ahead of time, preview like maybe things that are coming and just try a few strategies. I know one fear that I hear a lot from parents is the cleanup, which is like so obviously warranted.
We're all way more scared of like cleaning up the mess. That like, yeah, they might cut themselves, they might light something on fire, but really we're scared about the egg yolk all over the counter.
Totally. It's so annoying. And like, it's just like, am I just giving myself more work? One workaround that I've put in my recipes is I actually have incorporated the cleaning into the recipe. So it's not this like invisible step that comes later that the recipes don't mention. So I designate a space in the recipe where kids are cleaning up, and I'm really intentional about breaking down what that cleaning up looks like. So I would say there are ways, and I have an article about it, to make the cleaning up a little bit less scary. The other thing I think is, you know, I feel like kids are actually a lot more capable than we think. And often they are their most capable when we step back and let them do it. So like if we're hovering, if we're kind of like just right there, making sure the egg gets cracked. It adds tension, and it also like takes away their ability to try and fail. I would say to parents who are trying Nibblings recipes that it's a learning process. So, maybe the first one requires, or maybe the first one is a failure. Maybe the kids make a huge mess, but like trust that they're working on a skill the same way like when any of us started learning to cook, we made a lot of bad meals, and like that's really okay. And also like trust that they can maybe do a little bit more than you think they can. I feel like as a teacher, when I used to do parent-teacher conferences and I would talk to parents about their kids, they'd be like, my kid is doing that? Like they never do that at home. And it's like, yeah, like it's really, they can do a little bit more, but it's so hard as a parent, but it's so important to step back. And one way that I recommend sometimes parents doing that is like literally giving yourself something else to do. Because maybe you're so eager to be there, but maybe like give yourself a little physical distance and open a book, and that'll help you take a little space. It'll also, impart some trust. The kid being like, I trust you here. And I always highlight in my recipes where it's like a grab your grown up moment. And what I hope is that in those moments, the kids are actually learning to advocate for when they need help rather than the parent coming in and being like, let me come help you. Because that's obviously like a really useful skill to have in life. And we want them to have that skill, right? Like we'd rather them come ask for help than us like jump right in and give help before they've realized they need it or before they've even tried.
Are there any resources, books, something that like a layperson who might want to understand a little bit more about this way of thinking could look to that you would recommend or like?
I've been reading But I'm Bored. It's by Lizzie Asa, and she actually has a Substack as well. And so something that she talks a lot about is like just letting the kids kind of take the lead and giving them that space to gain independence. And it's actually written like not for educators. So that's great. That's But I'm Bored. And it's just all about like kids and independent play and how that's a skill that you can develop. And I think it's similar to like the kitchen. Like it's a skill. We have to kind of trust it as a skill, as something that they can develop, and it might not work at first. I really love Lifelong Kindergarten by Mitch Resnick, and that he works at the MIT Media Lab. And it's just like the concept of like lifelong kindergarten is like, what if school and learning just kind of felt like kindergarten forever? And that's just like really, really resonates with me of like, what does really joyful learning look like? And I like try to apply that when I'm ever making learning materials for kids.
Sophie, what is your hope for Nibblings? Like, what do you hope people get out of it long term? And maybe I don't know how grand your vision is of what you're going to do with it long term, but I'm really kind of curious.
I would really love for kids who are using it or parents who are using it to maybe just reignite or like find joy in learning. And if they are in the kitchen and it's like they are having fun with it, but maybe like the kitchen is not the hobby for them, they can like apply that to a different hobby. But really this idea of like nurturing learning and taking on challenges and gaining independence, so that to me, like it's just all about like creating lifelong curious learners. As far as like what I hope for the business, like I feel like I have a lot of big dreams for it. And I'm also, like about to have a baby. And I'm like, what does that mean? And that is its own challenge in itself. But I would love the idea of like building community around these conversations where, I can, hopefully be like a resource to parents and kids, where kids like would, be really excited about the next Nibblings recipe. And yeah, I mean, I've heard like from people that more video content would be helpful. Maybe like putting my face out there more. It's all lots of ideas, not exactly sure where to go next, but really hoping to just grow it. And I'm trying to be very iterative about it. And so just kind of like trusting what is like seeing what's working for folks and what's resonating and like, kind of moving with that as I go.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to follow along. I'm sure listeners are too. When we are going to Nibblings, what is maybe the first recipe that we should give a try?
That's a great question. I guess I would say my chocolate chip cookie recipe. I'll say just because based on my research, that is what kids are most excited about cooking. And I really believe that the experience of cooking through that recipe will be like, there's obviously so many accessible ways for kids to make chocolate chip cookies. You can just put some cookie dough in the oven and they've made it. But with this recipe, I think it's like a really great way for them to experience their efforts translating into something really delicious. So it's obviously more effort than putting cookie dough from the store on a pan, but on a sheet pan, but the payoff is so great. So I guess it's that they would really experience that pride and be able to make that connection. Like, I worked hard on this and I put more effort into it, and I actually made something really awesome. I think it's a really, really good cookie. My friends actually own a restaurant in Brooklyn, and they use the recipe and they sell that cookie at their restaurant. So, and trust me, it's a good cookie.
One thing I really like about Nibblings is, there's so much content out there about getting kids to eat their vegetables and eating a certain way. And like, there's certainly a place for that. And then there's also, here's just a cake and yay, here's something yummy that's a treat. But I think it's really important to remember that there is, I think, value and goodness in the work to get the treat. And I love that that's sort of what you're conveying. Like, yes, it's wonderful and our kids should eat vegetables, but it's also good for our kids to work to get a cookie, because that is such a tough lesson to learn, especially I see with my own children and, myself, plenty of adults. There are so many times that whether you're looking for validation or a dopamine hit, like, it can be hard to keep going. And it is just such a delightful way to learn that lesson of, like, sometimes you really got to put in the work, and then if you're lucky, you'll be rewarded. It doesn't always come out right, but oftentimes
and
it does.
And also the experience of sharing that with others. Like, I think cooking is such an expression of community and kindness and empathy. I like cook all the time for friends who just had a baby or having a birthday, and that experience is so meaningful to me. It's like how I show care. And for kids, like, sometimes the ways that they can show care are kind of limited. They don't, have income to be spending, and, maybe they like write a card, but to give them other avenues to do that is really an amazing way of, like, continuing to build those values in kids, which I see so strongly in cooking.
Oh, that's such a good point. Well, I'm feeling very motivated. Sophie, we are going to end this the way we always do, which is with the busy brain section of the podcast. So the first question is, how do you spark creativity in the kitchen?
I really love reading cookbooks and, like, actually reading them. So, like, I'll obviously read through the first pages. I know, like, some people just kind of, like, find their recipe and go. So when I get a little bit stuck, I'll, like, pull a new cookbook off a shelf or ask a friend for a recommendation, or go to the bookstore and kind of, like, do it, like, a little bit peeking through. And I mean, like, a huge thing for me, I live in Brooklyn and it's not as accessible now that I have a toddler, but, like, eating out is, like, a huge, like, the restaurant world in New York is, like, a huge source of joy for me. So I think that's, like, a huge thing too, getting out there, trying different foods from different places.
What are some of your favorite restaurants, a couple of your favorites in Brooklyn?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's a very difficult question.
I know.
And I'm like, should we go down to, like, what your neighborhood? Like, how do we?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave this open. Anywhere in Brooklyn, any type of restaurant, you're allowed to give me, like, 2.
I kind of feel like my main, like, neighborhood that I love to eat at, or, like, where there's, like, the highest concentration of my favorite restaurants is, like, Greenpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Tacos Ramirez, Ashimoko. This is, like, maybe a little bit closer to Williamsburg, but I love Bernie's. That is, like, one of my ultimate favorite restaurants.
We'll link to those 4. We'll link to those 4 in the show notes as well. So we have a couple of books to read, and we have 4 delicious restaurants to go to when we visit Brooklyn. And the second part of the Busy Brain section is always, how do you calm chaos? I feel like you're going to be really good at this one, Sophie. But how do we calm chaos in the kitchen?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends, like, what that chaos looks like. I feel like maybe, like, a pause or, like, a reset if you have a moment in, and this is, in the Nibblings recipes, I give that moment of a mid-cooking cleanup break is like when there's a moment to pause, maybe it's something needs to sit for a few minutes, or maybe something's in the oven for a few minutes. Like, don't step away. Like, use that moment to do like a quick tidy. And that can be really like as simple as just like throwing all the dishes in the sink that need, it doesn't need to be like a full cleanup, or just putting all the ingredients away. I think this is, something I talk about a lot with people with ADHD is like your workspace needs to be organized, because it is just like making your life more challenging if there's just too much there. So yeah, like take a moment, like, you don't need to get to the end to start tidying a little bit. And I think that might maybe relieve some of the stress.
That's a great suggestion, and it applies to everything. My husband is always like, take a break, like take a beat between tasks. What are you doing? I'm like, if I stop, I'll never be able to start again. But it's so true, taking that minute to like reset the workspace in your mind. And those moments are built in to recipes. But I think as adults too, it can be so like the siren song of your phone, like, oh, maybe I'll just scroll, or maybe I'll try to like go do some laundry, and then you're just returning to like this chaotic environment. It's a good reminder that like, no, you actually should stay focused on the recipe and reset. That's awesome. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for taking the time today. Where can we find you and Nibblings?
So Nibblings is through Substack, but the website is nibblingscooking.com. And I'm also on Instagram, and it's sophie.nibblings. Yeah. And follow. I'm so excited to hear how your experience goes with your kids trying it.
Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I cannot wait to make your chocolate chip cookies with my kids.
Thanks, Catherine. It's so great talking to you.
And you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that some of Sophie's lessons about cognitive awareness and executive function in the kitchen were helpful to you. And if you know someone who is learning to work with their busy brain in the kitchen, or they're starting to cook with their kiddos, please share this episode with them. And maybe, I don't know, bake them a batch of cookies. Thanks so much, you guys. I'll see you next time. I am always thinking about what we can do to improve the Not From Concentrate show and newsletter. And in order to keep getting better, I need your help. There is a very quick survey in the show notes, or you can find it at catherinesmart.substack.com. And it would mean so much if you could take 3 minutes and give us some feedback. What you like, what you want more of, what you never want to hear me talk about again. I want to hear all of it. The survey is open until July 14th, which isn't very long. So I hope you'll head on over and help us shape the future of the show. Again, that's catherinesmart.substack.com, or just take a peek in the show notes. Thanks so much. Not From Concentrate is distributed by PRX and produced by me, Catherine Smart, with audio and video production by Kevin O'Connell and Asia Garcia. Our associate producer is Allie Miller, and the theme music is by Kylie Daly.